Hey everybody, welcome to Example of Play, the home for strategy and tactics gaming. If you haven't subscribed already, now's your chance. Today's video is the next part of my Strategic Command War in the Pacific tutorial series. This is going to be tutorial number 5. It's going to be all about supply and logistics. So I've got the last few videos have covered the basics of the game and then went into each different types of units and kind of covered those. And now I'm going to look at supply and logistics and that side of things in a little bit more detail, as well as kind of bringing all the bits and pieces I've talked about before kind of to one place. So if you're just interested in that part, you can watch this video and hopefully kind of cover all of it to some extent. In these games, all of the strategic command games, the supply is super important, and then understanding the logistics and how all that stuff kind of comes together is important for planning out your strategy, how you're going to win the overall campaign. You got to understand how this stuff works. So can't underestimate or can't overstate how important supply is in this game. All right, so first off, we'll just review real quick the basics of supply and how to see it and what it kind of generally means in case you missed that in the other videos or just came straight to this one for some supply knowledge. So the most important hotkey in the game probably to know is the S key, or the one that you're going to use the most. And that brings up these numbers, and this shows you your supply levels by each hex. If you hit S again, you'll see you get some more numbers out here. These are estimates because you don't know what's out here. This is in the fog of war. There's probably definitely enemy units out here, and they're going to affect those supply levels. So these aren't for sure, but you can see what the prediction of what it would be, assuming there's no enemies there. But we can hit S several times to cycle through it. You can also click this button right here to do the same thing, but I just use the hotkey to bring that up. And then you'll notice that there's different colors. So dark green for your ground units, it goes from green to white. And then for your naval units, it goes from blue to white. And so the blue is obviously that's your naval, that's only affecting your ships at sea, and then the green is affecting your ground units and any aircraft units you have parked there. So why is supply so important? Why do we care about it? Well, I'll just go ahead and tell you now, it's one of the most important things in this game that you need to be aware of and you need to take into account as you move units around, as you go on your little operations, everything you do. You need to know what your supply level is going to be there, and if it's going to be low, what are you going to do about it? Which will cover headquarters units, how to use them to boost your supply in a minute. But the reason that it's so important is because if you send a unit into a low supply situation, it's going to be able to, its movement range is going to get reduced, how much you can reinforce it gets reduced, its ability to fight gets substantially reduced. And if we send units all the way up here where there's no supply, they will actually just disintegrate. They'll suffer attrition and they'll just lose strength points until they disappear. And so supply is just absolutely critical. You can make the mistake of thinking, oh, I'll just send some units out here in this desert where there's no enemies and I'll just circle around and hit them from the side, something like that. It's not going to work because you're going to get out there, your unit's going to run out of supply, and then by the time they reach the enemy, they're going to be so weak that they're not going to be able to do anything. So be careful thinking you can do that. You can use headquarters units to kind of pull off a little bit of stuff like that, but even the headquarters units are going to run out of supply if you send them like out into the middle of this barren desert, and it's just not going to work. So supply, super important to understand and take into account for basically everything you do. All right, so the next big question is, all right, so supply is important. We want to operate where there's good supply. How do we know which locations? Why do they have good supply or bad supply? What is these numbers based on? And so there are many different sources of supply on the map, and from those supplies trickle out. You see here at 12. 12 is the highest you can go for supply, but you're only going to find it in a few locations like major capitals for your major factions, and then also major ports. So like here is a major port. Here's a regular port, it's at 10. Major port is at 12. And then like this capital's at 12. And you come down here, this is a major city, but it's not the capital, so it's at 10. And basically from this location, supply pushes out and is reduced over distance, but also reduced by terrain. So if we look over, there's a good example for this. down here in Vietnam, so we have these cities, and these are settlements. They only have 5 supply. And if we look though, roads also help with supply. Terrain affects supply. So like a great example is here. We have 5 here, and then going in this direction, all these directions, it goes to 2 and then nothing, because there's mountains, there's rivers, very rough terrain right here. But if we follow along this road, it goes 4, 3, and then back up to 4 again as it gets to this next settlement. If we look here, kind of same thing, 4, 3, 5 versus 2 and 1 out here. And the difference is that there's a road running here and a railroad, and those help push the supply further along through difficult terrain. And so that makes roads very important. Obviously on your islands out there, you're going to have less geography, roads and things to work with, but like in China, over here around India, you're going to need to control the roads, and your units are going to need to move along the roads, because if you try to send guys out like into these mountains where there's no road or anything, they're just going to run out of supply and just die out there. Like if you try to send them up into the Tibetan mountains or something, it's not going to work. So look at the terrain and see how it's affecting those supply, and then consider your sources of supply. And then whenever you're on the offensive, this also comes into effect, because you can cut off those enemy sources of supply by taking railroads, by taking roads, and you can cut off enemy units if you hit in the right spot, because a lot of these sources, they're kind of boosted by being connected to a major source of supply by rail. Try to find a good example, but basically, as long as there's a rail connection running out to a location, you're going to get better supply. Like these guys all the way out here, they're at just a regular settlement, but it's connected by rail back to these major areas, and so it has supply of 8. Where if it was like over there in Vietnam, you also have a settlement, but it only has 5, and that's because it's not connected to a strong source of supply like those locations are. And even after studying the manual and looking at the map a lot, there's a few spots here where I don't quite see where the rules line up to make it the given number that it is. It's a little bit complicated, but that's the basics of it. Is sources of supply, bigger ones offer more, and then being connected by rail is going to push that supply out further, and then having your locations connected back to a friendly source of supply is going to let those locations offer more supply than they might otherwise. So let's talk a little bit more in depth on the headquarters units. Now, in the land units video, I talked at length about headquarters, how important they are, but here we'll focus just on the supply side of it, because they are probably the most important land unit, even though no matter how many armies and tanks and stuff you've built, if you don't use your headquarters units effectively, they're not going to be as effective as they could be otherwise. And really, it's going to be difficult to play the game if you don't understand how to use your headquarters units and all the things that they do. So besides boosting the abilities of units around them, for the purpose of this video, they boost supply in the area. And how you can see that is if we look at this headquarters unit, the location it's sitting on, it has a supply of 7 that's coming to the HQ, but the HQ is pushing out a supply of 10. So that's what this means. You see this 10 here, the HQ is creating this zone where supply is 10, where normally it'd be 7, and the units around it are benefiting from that. And then the red in parentheses here, the 7, that's what the HQ is receiving is 7, but it is boosting it to 10. And then if we come down here, we see, okay, this one is receiving 5 and it's boosting it to 8. And so that kind of depends on how much supply is coming in. But then also if a headquarters unit takes damage, the amount of supply it pushes out becomes less. So you want to keep an eye on that. The minimum it can kind of get down to, if the headquarters is getting nothing in, it can always push out supply of 3. So I mentioned like up here, you wouldn't want to send them out here because supply 3 is not very good. But even if you send an HQ unit out here where there's nothing, they would still scrap together 3 supply. But that's not 3 supply does not make for a good offensive. Sending your units out with that, and then even if they take damage, they always give out at least 1 supply even if they're damaged. And then through some research, it is with the logistics here, you'll see one of the things it does is increase the headquarters unit's minimum supply level. So logistics ties in, makes sense. And then the other thing with headquarters units is that they are important for amphibious invasions. So whenever you land an amphibious force, which obviously in this scenario, in the Pacific campaign, you're going to do that quite a bit, no matter which side you're playing as. The headquarters units can supply those land forces for a time after they land. So we'll come over here and we'll see this force has an HQ right here. And so if, say we land here, doing a little invasion. These guys are moving out. Now, we'll see that they have no supply. So they've landed. Now they land with some supplies. They can fight that first turn after they land at full strength on their supply, but there's nothing coming in. If we bring this HQ down and land it, now, and we have to cycle it to here because this is like the predicted value. Now it's providing supply of 8. So once on the next turn, this HQ landed here will give these guys supply that they wouldn't have normally if you landed with no HQ. And then that level will decrease by 2 points per turn. So if they land at full strength, full supply, you're going to have about 5 turns to secure like a port or an airfield or some other source of supply for your amphibious invasion force. So obviously, any kind of large-scale invasion, like there's some islands out here where you're invading like a little 1 hex island, or like Guam here's just got a couple hexes, that you're probably going to have to just take that thing by force. But any kind of large-scale landing, like if you're invading New Guinea or somewhere, you're going to want to bring an HQ with that force so that they can provide supply and give you a few turns to work with to defeat the defenders and take over a port or something else that's going to give you a permanent source of supply. All right, so now I've hammered on supply for a while. I've covered it in the other videos, covered it here. Hope you kind of get the gist that supply is super important in these games. You can definitely lose a huge force by sending them off and then running out of supply and you forgetting that it's just not feasible to send these units into the mountains or jungles without some kind of way to supply them. So next we will look at resources. These are locations on the map and that are giving you your MPPs, which we talked about before in the first video. The MPPs, that's your military production points. That's basically your money that you're spending on everything. So whether you're purchasing new units, repairing units, upgrading units, doing diplomacy, doing research, operationally moving units by rail, doing special events that pop up. There's a ton of stuff that uses the MPPs, so you kind of need to understand where are they coming from, what can affect them as part of your campaign strategy. So to tie it into where you can see these things on the map, the MPPs come from a lot of locations, so like cities and settlements and things. If we look at, say, like this little settlement doesn't give us any MPPs, it says 0, but this capital is going to give us 15. This is a major city's giving us 7.5. Oop, didn't mean to move those guys. But so the Showa Steel, so it's a mine, it's giving us 20. That's a huge amount. That's every turn, 20 of our points are coming from this one location. If we look, say, over here in China, we see like, oh, there's industry there. That's a mine that's worth 2. So it says 2. That's 2 per strength point. So we'll talk about in a second the strength points, but that would grow to be like the 20. There's another one. So say as the Japanese player, if you were somehow able to drive in there and take those, you know, you could increase your, there's another one there, like this area right here. Now, of course, taking that, easier said than done, but if you were to take all of those, that would boost your MPPs per turn by a huge amount. And then there's probably some that are a little more in reach for the Japanese. And here's an oil field, so 3 per strength point there. You can take that, obviously, huge. And so those are going to drive some of your decisions of, if I'm invading this China, this huge area, like where do I want to focus my efforts besides fighting enemy units? There might also be some specific locations that we want to take to give us a boost to our MPPs. And then likewise, if you're the Allies coming in and you want to starve the Japanese of resources, you're going to try to target some of those and take them back, and take them away from the Japanese. Like, here's an oil field too. We might want to snag that as the Japanese player for sure. And it also, ties into the real life history of like, why do they invade all these places? Because if you look at the Japanese mainland, you're not going to find any of these or any of these resource sites. Where you look down here, you're going to find a few scattered around. And as a Japanese player, you need to grab those to get yourself those MPPs to be able to keep up with the Americans coming, who get huge amounts. On the flip side of that, if you can't capture those points, you can damage them. So, for example, the best way to do that is with strategic bombers. You're not going to have those right away. And just like real life, it's going to take a while perhaps before you can get in range of using them against enemy targets. But if, say, you were the Allied player and you bombed this mine right here, you could reduce, so it has its MPPs are per strength point. So if you hit it and reduce its strength, it's at 10 right now. If you're bombing it, you can reduce that strength and you can reduce how many MPPs it pumps out. And then the strength, for every location, the strength will rebuild at 1 per turn automatically. There's nothing you can do to like speed it up. It doesn't cost you anything either. It just happens. So as that builds back up, it will recover. But if you can keep bombing it on a regular basis, you can starve out the enemy without even needing to go and take that location. You can just kind of blast it down to where it's not very productive. Doing that damage also reduces how much supply comes out of like a city. If you bomb it, it's not going to provide as much supply. So that's an important thing to think about. If you're the Allied player, the United States, so at the beginning of the campaign, has to mobilize. And so the United States at first won't get its full amount of MPPs for a while, because all these locations are actually like low strength and they have to build up over time. That happens automatically. So as the campaign goes, the United States will get more and more MPPs. The Japanese are going to need to take them by force by taking these locations and building them up if they're damaged when they're taken, and then protect them to maintain those production points. And so that's just a few things to think about of how many points you're getting can go up and down. Another one is these convoy routes in the ocean, that if you can hit those, you're reducing how many MPPs are flowing through those, so you can starve the enemy out a little bit more that way too. Now finally, to wrap things up, we'll look at the research screen and some of the technologies that are relevant to what we've talked about here. Most of them are kind of obvious. Industrial technology. The higher this goes, the more mobilized for war the economy is. It doesn't give specifics, but basically it's going to increase how many MPPs you get per turn. So, obviously that's something you'll want to be invested in and to max out as soon as you can, because the more points you're getting, you're maximizing, what you have. You're getting the most out of what you have, which is going to help you to get more points to get more units to capture more territory. You can look at production technology, which is pretty straightforward. It reduces unit costs, not directly related to what we talked about, but something to think about to tie into MPPs. You increase that, makes everything a little cheaper. Then logistics, mentioned it before. This is going to increase the minimum supply level of your headquarters and also can reduce some of your movement costs. So important to know about that. Naval construction, even though it's called naval construction, what it actually does is it increases the supply distribution values of ports, the ones that are not directly connected to a capital industrial center or primary supply center. So like we talked about, if they're not connected, you might not get as much supply pushing out from those ports. But if you research some of that, it's going to increase, it's going to help those push out more supply. And then one thing I didn't mention before is that a port can actually is a source of supply for ground units, but it can be blockaded. So if an enemy naval unit is adjacent to a port, it'll blockade it from providing supply to ground units. So that's important to know, no matter which side of it you're on. And then one other thing I forgot to mention, if you park 2 units adjacent to an enemy resource location, so say, like this mine that we keep coming back to, that one of the Japanese player was holding on to it and the Allied player managed to get 2 units next to it. Those 2 units being next to it would degrade it over time. So you can actually damage it just by having your units next to it, 2 of them. If know if you can't take it, if you can at least park there, you can kind of start degrading it over time. So a couple things to note on that. And I'm sure I've missed a couple nitty-gritty details on supply. Hopefully this gave you a better understanding of how it works and what the sources are, why these numbers are what they are. And as you play, you'll kind of see, the obvious thing is that you need to know where your supply is coming from. You need to understand how terrain affects it and reduces it. And you understand that you cannot send units out into a no supply situation, because when they get out here in 2, 3, 1, there's things they can't do. They become like just almost combat ineffective, and they will get just demolished by enemy units. One little quirk of the game, another little quirk, is that if a unit is at less than 5 supply when it's destroyed, it will be shattered, I believe, less than 5, and you'll lose national morale points, or they'll swing national morale points because that unit just got like wiped out. If they're at more than 5 supply and they're destroyed, they'll actually come back into the purchase screen, and you'll see them here. They show up a little bit differently, and you can rebuild them cheaper and faster because it's sort of like that unit got knocked out, but you're reforming what was left of it. Versus if they're at really low supply when they get destroyed, they're just gone. So that is something to think about, is not putting the units into really bad supply situations. And then, yeah, on the resource side of things, understanding those resource locations, why, like taking, great example down here, why, like as a Japanese player, you want to push and take this oil field like as soon as you can, because it's going to be giving you 3 MPPs per strength point. So you go take that, you build it up, that's giving you a lot more points to work with. And then as the allied player, coming back and thinking, okay, where in this area it's going to be difficult to accomplish much of anything, but if I can take, there's another oil field here, these oil fields, who controls those is a big swing in MPPs every single turn. And so that affects the whole, even though it's way over here in this area, the whole Burma campaign, it's affecting everything, because those points you can spend to fight the rest of the war in these other areas. So all this stuff ties together. The game, it doesn't, if you don't read the manual and kind of dive into it, it's hard to kind of understand some of it. So I hope this video was helpful to show you how that stuff works and give you a starting point. And then of course you can always jump in the manual to get a little bit more detail, but I think I've covered most of it. If you enjoyed this, make sure you like and subscribe. Keep watching this channel. This is going to round out kind of the core of this tutorial series, but I think I'm going to go through, there's a strategy guide for just each campaign, the main campaign plus the other alternate campaigns and scenarios. And I might do a video just kind of talking in general about the strategies for those different campaigns and stuff, just to kind of show you on the map what it's talking about in the text of the manual. So stay tuned for that and other strategy and tactics gaming videos. Thanks for watching. Bye.